forth the details about the amendment in the Forest Conservation Act which is being brought in. Ma'am, this bill was enacted in 1980, and before enactment of this act, the forest land being diverted by the state government for various non-forestry purposes. And if we look into the annals of land diversion by the state before 1980, we find that approximately 45 lakh hectare of land was diverted, mainly for agricultural purpose. But the problem with the central government was that the forest was in state list of the constitution. So by the 42nd amendment, which was brought in 1976, the issue of the forest was brought in the concurrent list. And then this act was brought in, which said that the forest lands will not be diverted for non-forestry purposes without prior approval of the central government. So since then, this act went on till 1988, when the first amendment was brought in, which included two more provisions. One was that the land can be given on lease to the private entities, and the second was no clear felling will be done. Moreover, provisions of advisory committee, how to look into the proposals, and penal provisions were also brought in 1988. Since then, there had not been any amendment in the act. This is the second amendment which is being brought in this act. So the basic aims and objectives of this act had been that the lands, forest land, should not be diverted for non-forestry purposes unless the government of India gives its consent or prior approval, what we call. So this act basically a regulatory act which looks into the de-reservation of the forest and diversion of the forest land for non-forestry purpose. If we, as I just mentioned, if we look at some of the data and have a bird's eye view, as I said, that 41.35 lakh hectare of the forest land had been diverted between 1955 to 1980, mainly for the agricultural purposes. And then the act came into force, and since 1980, we have diverted 10.04 lakh hectare of forest land so far in almost 43 years. And we have also done the compensatory afforestation on 12.39 lakh hectare of forest land, including both non-forest land and the degraded forest land. So at present, the system in place entails that the forest land can be diverted for non-forestry purposes with the prior approval of the central government. However, the user agencies have to pay for money for the compensatory afforestation and the net present value, which goes into the CAMPA account. And by using that, the compensatory afforestation is being taken. Before further moving ahead, these are some of the issues, or these are some of the points which elaborate that why this act, this amendment is being brought in. The first and foremost is that till 1996, December 12, there had been a lot of interpretations of the forest land for implementation of this act, unless the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court in T.N. Godavarman case, elaborated that the ambit of this forest land will not be confined only to notified forest, but also to the forests which are recorded in government record. Not only that, they also said that the the FC will be, the Forest Conservation Act will also be applicable to the forest having dictionary meaning, and for which every state will constitute an expert committee, and they will identify that what forest the states are having which are falling under the category of the dictionary meaning. So the state constituted expert committee identified some of the lands. In some of the cases, some definition kinds of things were also mentioned, and reports from all these states were submitted to the Honorable Supreme Court. In subsequent years, the issue of which record should be looked into and what is the dictionary meaning of the forest had been interpreted by different states and different agencies in different ways. Therefore, it was being felt that the provision for clarity on which the act will be applicable should be brought in, and it should be clarified that on which kind of forest land this act will be applicable. The second aspect of bringing in this amendment was that there had been requirement of constructing certain infrastructure which are having strategic importance or national importance, and their process should be simplified so that in case of exigencies or having some difficulties, the agencies could create those infrastructures in shorter period of time to defend the international borders of the country for the extreme requirement for the security and safety of the country. The third important aspect was that for 43 years, the act was only meant for diversion of the forest land, and in last couple of decades, instead of saying forest conservation, people started saying FC Act as a forest clearance act. So it has been a conscious decision that now the ambit of the act should be increased from Sanrakshan to Samvardhan, and we should not only promote the agroforestry or the plantations on the private lands, but we should also look into the productivity of the forest which we are having. How to increase the productivity of medium density forest to the high density forest, and how to replenish the open forest to make them planted. So this has been also the vision behind bringing this amendment in place. So the first part of amendment is where this act will be applicable. Here, the bill states that the act will be applicable A, on all notified forest under the Indian Forest Act or any act in force, maybe local act or state act. The second part tells that act will also be applicable to all forests which are mentioned in government records. And for the meaning of government record, it states, for the purpose of this subsection, the expression government record means record held by Revenue Department or Forest Department of the state government or union territory, or any authority, local body, community, or council recognized by the state government or union territory. Earlier, it was being thought that the government record means only revenue records. But in subsequent years, last year, the Honorable Supreme Court, in its judgment in the month of July 2022, stated that even if the forest is recorded in the forest record, the applicability of the act should not be hindered. Similarly, in the northern state, there are many unclassified forests which are with the council and communities, which are neither notified nor put in any government record. If those mentioned in any kind of record which is recognized by the state government, the applicability of the act will come. So these are the two very, very clear and focused approach which the act has, the proposed bill has taken. Moreover, it also tells that if there is a plantation raised, which slide you I'll just, so this is, the first was, sir, the declared or notified forest, which I was saying, sir, and the second I was saying that the forest in government record. Sir, okay, sir, the first part I somehow missed, then I'll go to the next program. Sir, the first part is that when I was, as I requested, sir, when the ambit of the act was increased from Sanrakshan to Samvardhan, then why the Samvardhan or the augmentation is being brought in was elaborated in the preamble given in the act, in the proposed bill, which tells that this act will take care about the increasing the forest cover of the country to the 1/3, looking into the international commitments which we have done either to achieve the NDC target of reducing the carbon emission from 2.5 to 3.3 million ton equivalent carbon dioxide, or to attain the target of net zero emission in 2070, and at the same time also providing the livelihood support to the communities by bringing in the conservation and protection of the forest into the focus. So these are the four, five major areas which have been included in the preamble. Number one, the national target of the net zero emission by 2070 and maintain or enhance the forest carbon stock. Number two, to achieve the nationally determined contribution for attaining additional sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. In C, or third, to increase the forest cover and tree cover to 1/3 of the land area which the country has. And four, that how to enhance the livelihood of the people and strike balance between the economic aspiration and the ecological security of the country. These are the major areas which have been. I can give you, sir. Will. Yes. So these are five major areas which have been included in the preamble of the proposed bill. The second part of the bill is that its ambit is being changed with proposed change in its name as Van Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhan Adhiniyam, which is emanating from the preamble which is being brought in, and also the provisions regarding clarity of the applicability of the bill, that it will not applicable to the land which are having the agroforestry done, will encourage people to plant more trees outside the forest as their personal trees or the agroforestry or the trees grown on their private land. And that will also give a push for increasing the productivity of the forest in degraded forest, which is also one of the very important area. So the first part, as the honorable member rightly pointed out, is regarding the preamble part, and the second part of the bill is that changing its name and increasing its ambit from forest conservation to forest augmentation, sanrakshan to samvardhan also. Then the third part of the amendment, I'll reiterate it, that it clarifies that where shall the act be applicable, on which kind of the forest land it will be applicable. So it is taking in account the Honorable Supreme Court's orders dated 12/12/1996. So the first part, it tells that the act will be on declared or notified forest under Indian Forest Act 1927 or any other law in time being in force. So any notified forest or record forest in any law, either Indian Forest Act or local law or state law, will come under the purview of the act. The second part is that, which is again emanating from the orders of the Honorable Supreme Court, that if a land has been recorded as forest in government record, for all practical purposes, for all purpose of the implementation of the act, the FC Act will be applicable on those land which is recorded as forest in government record. And for this purpose, an explanation has also been brought in, which I would like to reiterate, which tells that government record means record held by the Revenue Department, Forest Department, community, authority, council, recognized by the state. So it covers all the kinds of records wherein the land is recorded as forest. And the third part, which is also comes in this purview itself, that trees or tree plantations or reforestation raised on land which are not forest, the act should not apply on them. Because many a times people are afraid of raising crops because they think that there is a word which is very common in day-to-day parlance, is deemed forest, that they will attract the Forest Conservation Act. So there was a need to clarify this, that if someone is raising their own plantation on private land, that act should not apply on them. Then there is another important point which is important, is that when the judgment of Honorable Supreme Court came on 12/12/1996 and brought in all those lands which were recorded forest in government record, the FC came into force on those lands. But many of such lands had been changed. The land use of many such land had already been changed. So on those land, if even one has to put a hand pump, suppose I give an example, there is a school of girls which was on a revenue land which was recorded as forest on government record, whose land use had been changed. Those lands also came under the purview of the FC Act by the judgment of 12/12/1996. Now, to put a hand pump on that, in that school, one has to come for FC. So the clarification had already been given by the ministry that on those lands whose land use has been changed before 1980, the applicability of 1980 Act doesn't come into picture. Similarly, there was a need to clarify that those lands whose land use has been changed by an order of the competent authority before 12/12/1996, such as any school or any community related or public utility things, they should also not come into the purview of this act. So this clarification is also being brought in because the land use has already been changed of those land, and those lands were with the revenue departments and they were only considered forest land after the judgment of Supreme Court on 1996. So these are the four major things which are being talked in this act. I'll complete this. And then there are certain exemptions which are being proposed in this act. The first is that 0.10 hectare, 0.1 hectare of area up to 0.1 hectare of the area along the road and rails, if that has to be diverted for any public utility project, such as PMGSY road is coming and that is connecting to a national highway. So if this kind of proposals are required, they should not come to the Government of India under the purview of this act, and states with state under the terms and conditions which will be decided by the Government of India as per the proposed bill. After, if the bill gets passed, the state would be able to divert that land for such purposes. This is one exemption being brought in. The second exemption which is being brought in is that strategic linear projects of national importance and concerning security located within the 100 kilometers of the distance from the international borders, LAC and LOC, will not come under the purview of the act. The third exemption is related to this, is that the security related infrastructure involving up to 10 hectare of area will not attract the FC provisions. And the fourth is the public utility project and security related project in left-wing extremism affected areas involving 5 hectare of forest land. These exemptions are not blanket opening, which is being perceived many a times. These are with the conditions specified by the central government for this purpose. And since the land is the state subject, so unless the state agrees and state extend that facility to any user agency, that land cannot be taken from the state, and that too will be under the terms and conditions as specified by the central government, which is mentioned in the, if you'd like to see the para 4, which tells about the provision of 1A3, which it says the exemptions provided. It is on page 3, sir. Para 3, the exemption provided under subsection 2 shall be subject to such terms and condition, including the condition of planting trees to compensate felling of trees undertaken on the land as the central government may by guidelines specify. These exemptions will be subject to terms and conditions, including the compensation of the land being diverted. The only thing what the bill is looking at, that state at their level with the terms and conditions as specified by central government would be able to divert that forest land, but it doesn't mean that any agency can directly come and acquire a land. Land is the state subject, and unless the state agrees and the user agencies comes with the terms and conditions of this central government, those land will not be open for any kind of access. And not only that, the project of national importance and national security is also decided by the Government of India, usually by the cabinet. So not all projects or all work will come under the purview of these exemptions. The next clarification which has been brought in the bill is that there was a section which was inserted in 1988 as section 2(3), which stated that a forest land can be given on lease to any private entity which is not government owned. This was not a level playing field. So the agencies or the state PSUs were taking the forest land on lease and blocking them for a very long time. However, for a private entity, the same lease was going through under the process of the FC. Here, the provision has also been made applicable for the government agencies. So now either it's a private entity or organization or government body, if they have to take lease under the section 2(3) of the Forest Conservation Act, they have to come to the Government of India, and it is not only applicable to the private entity, but will also be applicable to the government entities. In the original act, the non-forestry purpose was, and there is another provision, exemption is being brought in, which is being already extended, but extended through guidelines. For many mining or other activities such as exploration of natural gases and hydrocarbons, this reconnaissance surveys and many kind of investigation and surveys are done. For them also, the agencies had to come for the diversion of the forest land, wherein there was no tree felling was involved or no change in the forest land was involved. So a provision is being brought in, subject to terms and conditions will be specified by the central government, that in case survey or reconnaissance survey or prospecting or investigation related to the exploration is required for, and that is not involving the felling of the trees or the change in the forest land, for such survey, for such exploration and investigation, the FC will not attract, and there will be an exemption. Certain degree of exemption is already extended through guidelines that is being brought in the provisions of this bill. And then there is a provision which is being brought in is regarding an enabling clause for issuing clarifications or guidelines by the central government. The present system, what we have in place is that we have FC Act, and then and FC rules also emanate from the provisions section 4 of the FC Act. But for day-to-day implementation, it becomes very difficult to bring change in rules, and we issue clarifications and guidelines by bringing it to the advisory committee. So an enabling clause has been brought in that in case of there is any difficulty being faced by the state government or central government for rolling out of the provisions of the act or for issuing the clarification, there must be an enabling clause which empowers the central government to issue the guidelines or the clarifications about the act. So these are some of the provisions of the act. Yes, sir. Zoo survey and exploration and explanation, sir. Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, the original bill has a clause which explains that what will not be considered as a non-forestry activity and what will be considered as a forestry activity. For instance, sir, if horticulture is taken, palm oil plantation is taken, that is considered as a non-forestry activity for which you have to come for diversion. But there are certain clarifications were given. Suppose the fire line is being made, or the forest chowki is being made, or some forest silvicultural practices are being done. Those are considered as a forest activity. Two important provisions are being brought in here, that in case a zoo or safari is being established which is owned by the government, that will also be considered as a forestry activity, subject to there is a recommendation in the respective management plan or tiger conservation plan or wildlife management plan approved by the competent authority, and not in the protected area. It's out of the national park and sanctuaries, because we are not promoting that within the protected area zoo safari should be made, but in any other forest area which is not national park and sanctuaries and government act, that can be brought in, because this gives support to the livelihood of the local people, and a lot of people come to see them. That also covers the target of conservation education, because it's not possible for everyone to go to the safaris and national parks and see animals every time. So that gives a lot of conservation education, people who could see the local flora and fauna into the zoos and safaris.
Yeah, Madam, I would like to thank the presenter, Mr. Pandey, for presenting.
Thank you, sir.
I would just like to raise one area of concern, which is regarding indigenous tribal lands. Say we are from Northeast, I'm from Northeast, I'm from the state of Mizoram, within the international boundary with Bangladesh and Myanmar. Same case with Manipur and Arunachal and the states. So our concern is mostly tribal, indigenous, tribal forest areas. What will be the consequences of this bill? I mean, the pros and cons. What will be the safeguard? Is there any safeguard?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The rules 2022 of FC rules, which tells that how the processes will be dealt, clearly mentions that the forest land will be only diverted when the formalities of other laws and other procedures, especially the Forest Right Act, is complied with. So the rules specifically tells that it cannot be diverted for non-forestry purposes unless the local communities are taken on board. That is there in place.
Okay. Yes, in case there is a need for diversion, then we have to get the permission of central government?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. I want to know from you, since you say this subject always comes under only current things, but from this state, in the case, center will have everything upon hand. What will be the role of states? In tribal states, I'm from Arunachal, we still practice tuning and simplicity cultivation. And this is because now the International Year of Millet, which is encouragement is millet cultivation. Because millet is popularly grown in hilly areas and tuning areas. So what would be the alternative? What is the power of state, the role of state, vis-a-vis?
Sir, land is the state subject. Unless the state governments wishes to get that land diverted for non-forestry purpose, the proposal does not come to the Government of India. Government of India gives the prior approval. So all power related to the state land vests with the state government. Moreover, for formulating this amendment, the views of the state were taken, and the Joint Committee of Parliament also visited in those areas. They visited Srinagar, then they went to Uti, and then Bhubaneswar. And all the states which may get have an impact of the amendments being brought in, and all the stakeholders, including retired officials, people from civil society, they have been heard. And the proposed bill takes care of all these delicate nuances, and the views of all the stakeholders have been taken by the committee, and they have. And there is an enabling provision if there is any need of clarification. Yes, 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 sir.
You mean to say the land that is forest land?
Yes, sir.
The state has ownership.
Yes, sir.
but permission will be granted by the central government. All this discrepancy.
Sir, actual permission is given by the state only. When the prior approval is given by the central government, then the state issues the final approval and handovers the land. Even if the prior approval is given by the central government, and if the state doesn't wishes, that cannot be given to the user agencies.
It doesn't explain fully. Prior permission, suppose for one work, one project, prior permission by central government, then by state government.
Yes, sir.
This is discrepancy. This is not very clear. Please clear.
What is the meaning of prior permission?
Sir, land is the state subject. State can give the forest land for any non-forested purposes. But the FC Act was brought in that, especially for this, that if you wishes to divert a forest land for non-forested purposes, the proposal should be shown to the government of India, have its view whether it should be given or not. And then there is after a lot of deliberation, even in court, in Lafarge-Union case, the decision support system was brought in, which also look into the imageries and see whether the area is inviolate or the highly ecological values or not. So government of India sometimes gives consent and sometimes doesn't give. But sir, even if the government of India agrees, the actual transfer of land has to be given by the state. Even when we suppose government of India agrees and state government does not agree and doesn't want to give the land, it can be. Even then the act will prevail here. Then this act will prevail, sir. The Forest Conservation Act. No, sir, it cannot give. It cannot give, sir. Here the act has an apparency. Yes, sir.
It is not very clear, very complicated. I must
Sir.
very complicated. आप individual project लीजिए, large project लीजिए, website पे क्या पहले एक गवर्नमेंट देखेगी वो 100 एकड़ 500 एकड़ उनको दे दीजिए ट्रांसफर मतलब ये
जी सर
it is very complicated.
Sir, it's now the Parvesh portal has been.
And one more thing.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the procedure,
Yes.
I was in of the forest.
Yes, sir.
It took 2 years, 3 years for the clearance of the union. And the process was so cumbersome. When the amount was deposited, then also it will go to the Ranchi, the regional bench, then goes to another page. So the process was so cumbersome that it took minimum 2 to 3 years. So they have made any arrangement in the bill or in rules to simplify the procedure, the process. So it can be implemented in 6 months or 4 months or whatever.
Sir,
Your experience. So we suffered. Who doesn't or who doesn't? Prime Minister not only announced for it last time. We had to wait for 7-8 years in spite of a regular debt.
Sir, for your information, sir, I would like to bring in the knowledge of you all august members of the Parliament. Sir, in 2022 June, the rules have been changed, sir. And not only that, the portal which was being used has also been upgraded into Parivesh 2.0, sir. So the rule has further simplified it. For instance, sir, up to 5 hectares of proposal, they do not need to go to the regional empowered committee. Not only that, one step of conservator up to 5 hectares has also been taken out from because it was very lengthy, sir. Thirdly, sir, a committee at the state level has also been constituted so that it doesn't pass through a linear process and everyone raises doubts and questions. So the project steering committee will decide what papers are required, and they will forward the proposal to the IRO, sir. and the proposals are being tracked. The other processes have been made parallel, and in last couple of years, sir, the time which the ministry is being taken, sir, ministry and state is being taken, sir, it has come to 180 days, sir. And the average time what we have taken in the ministry has come to the 30 days, sir. So your concern is right, sir, because this is a long process and it has required a lot of support in processing things, sir. So the Parivesh 2.0 and the Rule 2022 has been brought in, which is pushing the proposals to move faster, sir. And sir, for sir's question, sir, there is a provision which is being brought in the amendment of bill, sir, that up to 0.1 hectare, yes, sir, up to 0.1 hectare of forest land which is falling along the road and rail can be diverted by the state government for public utility proposals. Yes, sir. So PMGSY, especially keeping 0.1 hectare, every such land will come into that, sir. So the reason this was, I just mentioned when you were not here, sir, this was one of the reasons that such public utility projects, which are extremely important to connecting the farthest points of the, villages especially, they will be benefited, sir. Sir, namaskar, sir. Yes, sir.
But just to one example, my district.
Masti, sir.
It was 730. It was exact for last 5-6 years. And one state of from Scotland to there, 28 kilometers. So there was some reserve forest. And because of that reserve forest, it could not be any initiative of the construction. The rest of the road, it is known as the Buddhist circuit also. It starts in the road. Couple was to sounds there. And I am moving to the state government to come to what they are saying, see now, we can be reason, is some real for it, whatever trend will be real for it will be so the same area will be given to civilians. In my district, there is no I could not succeed. Ultimately, I have succeeded. Now, some we are taking the real forest in my district, but we are the same area, the state government is ready to provide its own data.
That is applicable. So somehow this is the confusion. The new rule doesn't only allows planting in the other district, but even in other states also. If the lands are not available in one state, the compensatory afforestation can be done in the other state where the land is available. That has been brought into the.
Only because of this problem.
There may be lack of knowledge. Yes.
Last 5-6 years.
Sir, if you will give the details of the proposal, I'll look into the personally, sir. Maybe because of the lack of the information, sometime people interpret in such way. But in the rules of 2022, the plantations can be done into the other district. Even if the land is not available, it can be done into the other states. Not only that, one accredited compensatory afforestation guidelines have been brought in. If there is a forest, there is a land which has been already grown with the trees, that can also be swabbed in lieu of the compliance of the compensatory afforestation. So, sir, a lot of changes have been brought in. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 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 Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We have the Forest Conservation Act.
Yes, sir.
And this bill fulfills some amendments.
Yes, sir.
From what I understand, the amendments will allow certain activities in certain forest areas.
Yes, sir.
Now, I wish to understand what are those forest areas, because in section 4 it says that the land that has been section 4B on page 2 of the bill.
Yes, sir.
it says the land that is not covered under proposal but has been recorded in human records as forest as on or after 25th October 1980. So this particular confusion, so I just like to know that these amendments, which are allowed certain activities, will be allowed in what reserve forests, all forests, or recorded forests. So that is my first question. And after that, I'll just put on my series of questions and answer reservation. We have the Karma activities going on. Now the afforestation or reforestation which happens in the Kampa. Now of course, as you know, it takes years for a forest. अब जो Kampa के अंदर आज forest लगाया जाता है, उसका क्या फीचर है? Will they be notified forest or recorded forest? या आज हमने Kampa के अंदर forest लगाया और 4 साल बाद उसका हम लोगों ने classification change करके उसको भी हमने development activities में नहीं किया. That is a question. तो जो हमारे नेशनल पार्क्स हैं एंड रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट के जो बफर जोन है जैसे कॉर्बेट का बफर जोन, अब वो बफर जोन के अंदर व्हाट एक्टिविटीज विल दे रिमेन टू बी प्रोटेक्टेड और विल दे आल्सो कम अंडर द एक्ट द अमेंडमेंट्स दैट आर.
Sir, first point which you have raised, that what kind of the forest on which this act will be applicable and what is the amendment will be applicable and what is the meaning of on 1980 and after 1980. Sir, all forest recorded or notified under Indian Forest Act or any act, the act will be applicable. Which was on 1980 means all those lands which had been notified till 1980 on that day, and even after that, the act will be applicable.
The
amendment will be applicable. So there is no ambiguity. All reserve forest under any act, whether it is section 4 or section 20 or any local act or any state act, the act will be applicable.
So that means that even in reserve forests.
Earlier there was written only forest land. So there were interpretational issues. Supreme Court clarified in 12/12/1996. Now that has been brought in as it is, without any dilution or any change.
So Ramesh is not that as well as reserve forest.
Yes, sir.
There is some activities that is listed under the amendments. Will those activities be also allowed in reserve forest?
Sir, there are two different things. Allowing the diversion of this act usually talks of diversion of the forest land. If a land can be diverted or not. So if there is a forest land which comes under the reserved or protected category, if that has to be diverted for any non-forestry purpose, the FC will be applicable. Yes, FC Act will be applicable. जी सर, जी मैम.
जितने भी आपने बड़ा अच्छा प्रेजेंटेशन है, लेकिन मुझे ये लगता है कि जहाँ जनजातीय क्षेत्र है,
जी मैम,
यही वन क्षेत्र में निवास करते हैं, तो वहाँ दुर्गम स्थल है, सड़कों का कोई निर्माण नहीं है और सड़कों के निर्माण के लिए भी फॉरेस्ट एक्ट के अकॉर्डिंग बिना परमिशन नहीं होगा. इसका कोई ना कोई सुविधाओं का प्रावधान इसमें जरूर है.
मैम,
एक मेरा दूसरा प्रश्न है कि जल प्रबंधन के लिए आज आवश्यकता है जिसमें राजस्थान जैसे पहाड़ी क्षेत्र से बेहतर आने वाले पानी के प्रबंधन के लिए भी एनओसी की आवश्यकता होती है. 4 साल 5 साल लग जाते हैं, तो उन परिस्थितियों को भी कहीं ना कहीं इसको आइडेंटिफाई करना चाहिए. एक मेरा वन क्षेत्र में जो जंगली जानवर भी है, बस पालतू जानवर भी है, और जहाँ जनजातीय क्षेत्र है वहाँ कैटल शीट बनाने के लिए कहीं न कहीं आपकी परमिशन होनी चाहिए. इस बिल में प्रावधान होना चाहिए ताकि कैटल शीट बनेगा तो वो जनजातीय क्षेत्र में रहने वाले लोग इसको करेंगे. एक मैंने बड़ा हास्यास्पद है कि क्षतिपूर्ति. अब फॉरेस्ट में यदि बकरी मर गई 2000, ऊंट गया 20,000, इंसान गया तो 2 लाख, ये कोई कीमत नहीं. इसलिए इस बिल में कहीं ना कहीं प्रावधान हो कि जो भी लॉसेस हों उसमें हमें निराशा करने की जरूरत है. अपने जो विगत जितने भी बिल में प्रावधान है, जब आप बिल में कुछ और नया जोड़ने की बात सोची है तो इस क्षेत्र को भी इसमें सम्मिलित किया. दूसरी ये कि सामाजिक क्षेत्र इसमें पिछड़ा ना है। आज आपने रोड के और रेल के आजू बाजू का प्रावधान रखा है, लेकिन इसके साथ साथ ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में यदि वृक्षारोपण को प्रोत्साहन देने के लिए तो इस एक्ट में कोई बात रखी जाए तो ग्राम पंचायतें इस एक्ट के अकॉर्डिंग पूरा काम करने में समर्थवान होगी और हमारा वन क्षेत्र बढ़ेगा। हॉर्टिकल्चर को भी कहीं ना कहीं इसमें जुड़े। मैं सवाई माधोपुर रणथंभौर की रहने वाली हूं, और रणथंभौर में जिस तरह से सराउंडिंग क्षेत्र के 92 बीज जो बाहर निकाले गए वो आज भी इतने दुखी हैं कि एक रात में उनकी पूरी फसल को जल्दी से होता है। उन परिस्थितियों में क्या उनको कोई क्षतिपूर्ति दी जाए? अभी तक कुछ नहीं। तो ये ऐसी परिस्थितियां हैं कि रणथंभौर विश्व प्रसिद्ध स्थान है, टाइगर को बचाना लेकिन इंसान के बच्चों को भी बचाना, ये दोनों बातें कहीं ना कहीं इस बीच के अंदर आनी चाहिए। ये एक ही फॉरेस्ट की बात नहीं कर रही हूं मैं, देश के जितने भी हमारे टाइगर हैं सराउंडिंग में रहने वाले सभी लोगों को शैक्षिक, सामाजिक, आर्थिक उन्नति के प्रावधान भी कहीं न कहीं फॉरेस्ट एक्ट में जुड़े।
नोटेड मैम।
मैं क्षमा चाहूंगी। मोदी जी चेयरपर्सन का दायित्व संभालेंगे। आपको
last one or two questions on because of the price of it.
एक मेरा एक वो आया कि प्राइवेट एंटिटी इज अलाउड फॉर प्राइवेट एंटिटीज so will be used, this law will be used indiscriminately.
सर पहले ही था 1988 में ये प्रोविजन था कि फॉरेस्ट लैंड को जैसे कोई माइनिंग के लिए सिर्फ ये था कि लीज जो है अगर लेना है, 88 में लाया गया था ये प्रोविजन, ऑलरेडी है इसके अंदर, बट वो प्रोविजन सिर्फ ये लिखा था कि प्राइवेट व्यक्ति के लिए होना चाहिए, किसी पीएसयू के लिए नहीं होना चाहिए। सो होता ये है कि पीएसयू भी सेमी गवर्नमेंटल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होते हैं, तो अब ये कहा गया कि प्राइवेट के लिए तो लागू होगा ही, सेमी गवर्नमेंटल के लिए भी लागू होगा, क्योंकि आप जमीन को लीज पे लेके ब्लॉक कर देते हैं कुछ टाइम पे, उस पर एक्टिविटी नहीं करते लेकिन उसको ब्लॉक कर देते हैं। सो जब ये प्रोविजन 88 में लाया गया था तो मुख्यतः प्लांटेशन के लिए लाया गया था, लेकिन वो प्लांटेशन में इस्तेमाल नहीं होने के कारण माइनिंग एंटिटीज उसको इस्तेमाल करने लगे। सो माइनिंग एंटिटीज जो है उसको लीज पे लेकर रोक लेते हैं जमीन को, और फिर जब उसको खोदना होता है तो 2-2 में आते हैं, उनको परमिशन लेना पड़ता है 2-2 में। सो 2-3 में लेने की जो व्यवस्था थी वो सिर्फ 88 के प्राविधान में प्राइवेट एंटिटी को थी, गवर्नमेंट ओन्ड एंटिटी को नहीं थी। और गवर्नमेंट प्राइवेट एंटिटी को एनपीवी जमा करना पड़ता है जो कि पैसा होता है अच्छा खासा। गवर्नमेंट एंटिटी के लिए वो अप्लाई नहीं हो रही थी, उनको एनपीवी भी जमा नहीं करना पड़ता था, और वो एक पीएसयू जमीन को ब्लॉक करके रखते थे। इसलिए ये प्रोविजन लाया गया कि 2-3 में अगर आपको लीज लेना है और आपको कोई जमीन ब्लॉक करके रखना है तो प्राइवेट एंटिटी और गवर्नमेंट अंडरटेकिंग दोनों के लिए ये एप्लीकेबल होना चाहिए, सिर्फ प्राइवेट एंटिटी के लिए नहीं होना चाहिए। ये इसको एक लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड के लिए ये लाया गया।
फॉर्मल मीटिंग खत्म कर देते सेवा जी को पूछना हो अलग से।
जी सर।
सभी करके सब कोई पार्टी को जाना चाहिए। जी सर। हमें लेकिन अपना टेलीफोन नंबर।
जी सर, जी सर।
जो माइनिंग के कारण जो
डबल सर नंबर दे देता 99587 05 413।